Well, hello everybody. My name is Rose Roscoe. I'm an occupational therapist and assistive technology specialist for both Special Ed Tech Center and also for Bellevue School District. So welcome to the webinar today. We've been integrating UDL in many of our classes, and today we're going to dig in again. And my goal today, you should see some new material. There'll be some familiar things and some new material helping you dig deeper and support teachers in how do you implement UDL and how do you help teachers do planning for these remote class sessions that are happening right now. And what do those multiple options look like? So I'm going to kind of dig into a few ideas, and this is going to be interactive. So if you're like me, I'm guilty of having the webinar up on one screen and then multitasking on the other while I listen. And just to let you know, I will be doing some talking, but I'm also going to give you at least 3 options to go in and explore some resources. So it's just not me talking about it. I will open them up and get familiar, and then I want you to have a chance to engage with the resources. So with that, so our agenda today is we're going to kind of kick off with a little bit of UDL Buffet. And then I'm going to introduce some UDL planning resources. I created a resource in August called Designing Accessible Content, Curriculum Content, and it's a tip sheet. We're also going to show you in more detail the inclusive technology with at Home and School website that SETC created last March, and we're continuing to upgrade and add to, and would love your input on how we can improve that for not only educators, but families at home and students to use. And then how do accessibility tools consideration fit into that planning process, and how can you coach and support teachers in your roles in considering accessibility needs of students. And then we're gonna pretty quickly jump into some ideas on UDL educational experience design, AKA lesson planning. And if you're familiar with Chris Bouguet, this is his term that he uses in his book, and we are going to do a book study again this fall on his book, Making Learning Awesome for All. And I have created some learning menus by grade level. So for early learning, elementary, and secondary, what would some examples look like of activities that you might provide as options? So I tried to address all the different grade levels of, that you might be serving out there. And then we'll talk about a little bit about the CAST UDL lesson planner. So my caveat today is I took my original idea from last spring when I put this webinar up, and I actually ended up morphing it to what I just created in August. Kind of we were requested through SETC to do some kind of emergency remote learning and UDL sessions. And so I really felt like I wanted to bring those resources forward today. And there might be some things I carry over to another spring training as well. So again, like I said, we're going to learn about a variety of UDL implementation strategies and tools to use in the classroom, learn about and share UDL resources, websites, and lesson design. And I'd like you to be able to name at least 2 accessibility considerations when selecting and or designing digital curriculum. And finally, be able to design, or at least start designing, a UDL education experience plan that can be used with your students. Or, like I said, you could use to coach teachers if you're in a coaching role. So of all the UDL kind of overview stuff, I really decided I wanted to focus on this UDL Buffet idea, which comes from Katie Novak. And you may have seen this video before, but today I want you to be honing in on the idea of how do teachers offer a true buffet of learning options. And listen to what Katie says and think about how you can use that idea, very practical and relatable idea of a buffet, to help your teachers embrace what UDL means right now in our classrooms. So go ahead, we're going to watch this. And then notice also when I'm showing a video, not only is it closed captioning in our third-party app, but you can actually click closed captioning right in YouTube as well. So enjoy, Katie, and then we'll come back and talk more.
So people ask me all the time, what on earth is UDL? UDL stands for Universal Design for Learning, and it is not differentiated instruction. Whenever I present to teachers or I talk to teachers and I say, oh, UDL is a really great way to give kids choices for how they're going to learn and how they're going to personalize their learning, I hear, oh, I do that already. We used to call it DI. Well, DI exists and UDL exists, and they are actually two different things. And so to give you a little analogy, UDL is kind of like when you're having a dinner party when you put out a buffet. So when you're teaching and you want to give students choices for how they're going to learn, you would put out a buffet of options. For example, you would say, after you are solving all of these math problems, you're going to explain or justify how you solve them. And you can do that in a poem, or you can do that in a narrative, or you can create a little skit, or you can do a poster, and you're going to justify your answer. And so what you're doing is you're putting out a buffet of all options. And by nature of having those options, students have to become very creative and self-directed and choose what's best for them. Differentiated instruction, on the other hand, is a similar framework in that it's still providing options for students, but those options are often managed by the teacher. For example, I might say to a certain student, you know, I know you have a hard time writing, and so why don't you draw me a picture about how you solve that? Or I might take a whole group of students who I think need a little bit more challenge, and I take them aside and I say, okay, because you're finished, I want you to work on this. And so those options are kind of like making meals for every single kid in your class. And if I had the option to either put out a buffet and allow my students to choose, or to make 30 meals, I would choose putting out a buffet. And so part of teaching and learning today is about giving students control of their own learning and transferring some of that power back to them, because coming up to a buffet requires that you have to self-assess, and you have to think about what is it that you need to eat and what is it can you eat, and then you put it on a plate together. Whereas as teachers, if we're worried all the time about creating these perfect meals for everyone, we're going to be exhausted and we're going to be burnt out in the kitchen.
All right, I love Katie. I love the way she says stuff. It just makes a lot of sense, and she's also very passionate about it. So let's move on.
So people ask me all the time, what on earth is UDL?
Oh, I was there. Okay, so let's talk about this UDL buffet idea. Again, I'm sure you've heard about it before, but we're going to revisit that in just a slightly different angle here. So as I was thinking of putting a picture of a buffet on this page, my first choice was to do something like the upper left, where it's just a picture of a table with all this food on it. And I thought, well, would that be relatable to every student? Maybe, how could I make sure there was a variety of different cultural menus there? So I started just looking up individual pictures of Asian food and Indian food and Italian food and Mexican food and Greek food and good old American hamburger. But the point is that I wanted to make sure that for all of you guys out there, that you could relate to the food idea. And on that page, hopefully there's at least one thing that you're like, oh, that looks really good. Because frankly, it's going to look different for each of us, right? We don't all like the same foods, or we might have dietary restrictions. So I love that idea, and also just building on that thought of having multicultural considerations for your choices. So for instance, if you're assigning a book, are you assigning a book that is sensitive to different cultures, or maybe you want to give at least 3 or 4 options that have different cultural backgrounds, so a student could choose something that's relatable to them. Andrea, I'm just going to ask you to mute people in the background. That'd be great.
Do what?
You mute the people in the background that are not muted. That'd be great. There'll be time later if you want to chime in. That'd be great. Okay, so moving on with that, I do like to keep referring back to this UDL guidelines sheet, and I know you can't read that from this angle, but you do have you can open up your own PowerPoint and zoom in. So on the right, I've just pulled out the 9 big ideas. So if you look at those boxes, there's 3 boxes under engagement, 3 under representation, and 3 under action and expression. And just thinking of when you're setting out your buffet of options, making sure you consider those big areas to address when you're creating those options. Like, does your student need some ideas that will recruit their interest? Is that the big area? Because maybe you have these 3 great books, but if they're not interested in that, maybe they need a movie, or maybe they need something they can put their hands on and do because they're just tired of the computer. So thinking of each of those boxes. Maybe they need some extra support with language and symbols or augmentative communication. Maybe they just really are struggling with organization and tracking all this remote schooling, and you might give them some options to support their executive functions. So besides just being a fun buffet of food and options, what about, again, just referring back to this and keeping this guideline as an anchor when you're planning or advising teachers on planning UDL lessons. So I just like you to keep that in mind always when you're planning. So to that end, what I wanted to do is create what would be an easy lesson template. And I've designed lots of versions of templates over the years, but I like this one, and I've kind of redesigned it so that we're looking first at what are the goals we're addressing, probably IEP goals or learning goals. Maybe it's a more general learning goal. And then you're going to be listing options under each of these categories: engagement, representation, expression. And then for those activities, thinking about the students that you're serving, what accessibility tools might they need in order to access those options that you've given them? So it's almost kind of like when you're lesson planning, think of that student that has dyslexia or the student that needs switch access. And in order for you to give them access to core or those whatever options you give, you might have to set up some accessibility features ahead of time and make sure they're up and working, because students with vision disabilities as well. So that's just a preview of the form that we're going to be working with, and there's a copy of this in the Google folder that you guys all have a link to. So that's kind of setting the stage. So now I want to jump into planning resources, and I'm going to just take some time to review a few areas where you can just go. And rather than you trying to remember a million different tools and resources, I'm going to show you where to find them and how to navigate to them later so that you can refer back to this, make it as one of your favorites. We worked hard to put a lot of resources here for you, and we really think it has a lot of great ideas. So specifically, I'm talking about a SETC website it's actually linked into our main website, and it's called Inclusive Learning with Technology at Home and School. And we created this website in last March in response to COVID-19 and remote learning. And we really wanted to make a supportive website that not only would be for educators, but also for students and their families. Trying to keep it user-friendly, picture graphics, trying to use simple language as much as possible, and address a lot of different areas. So what I did here is this link here for you is like I think it's about an 8 to 10 minute walkthrough video that I created that you could share with others, or you could watch, on your own. But I thought it might be good to also kind of give you a walkthrough. So before I go on to that website, I just want to show you a few other slides. The next slides are going to be just another way to launch into this website from different interest areas. So for instance, this first area, we talked about engagement, the UDL engagement principle, and we have a whole section on engagement tools for online and classroom learning. So if you click on this link, you'll go straight to the engagement page. And then there's the social emotional learning page. And usually we don't think of making a social emotional learning page for an assistive tech website. But again, in this culture of remote learning, we're finding a lot of our students are struggling in this area. And how can we really work with teachers to support them so that they can be in a good space in order to engage and use, all the other great tools that we provided for them. So there's some ideas there for a launch page. And then looking under the area of representation, we have lots of resources for reading, books, translation, closed captioning. There, if you want to, when you're doing your lesson planning later, you can go straight to a free digital book section. You can look up screen readers. So again, I'm just doing a quick orientation here. Maybe you really want to dig into translation tools. What's available and what do I have to do? I've been meaning to do more of that. So if that's where you're at, maybe you want to spend some time here. And then in expression, we have some low tech to high tech options, including communication and AAC. So this page launches you to low-tech ideas. This slide launches you to multimedia ideas. There's a whole page, and I'll kind of show you that on the website. This launches you to kind of higher level writing, options to support the writing process, everything from dictation to typing programs, lots of stuff there. And then looking at accessibility tools here. And what we've done on our accessibility tools pages is we have a page on Google Chrome tools, if you're a Google district, iOS tools, which a lot of us are using as a secondary resource for a lot of special ed kids, and then the Microsoft tools. So you can go there and I'll show you what that looks like a little later. And then maybe you want to dig into accessibility features, hardware, and we have a whole page on that. So these are kind of your slide launch pages. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on those, but I just wanted to show you that if you get lost on the web page and you just want to get to one of these areas, you can just go through this slide, and you should all have a copy of the PowerPoint. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go back here to my SETSI website page, and you are welcome to go with me if you want to explore alongside me. I'm just going to, again, give you an overview, give you an orientation. I'm going to give you time to explore on your own now and or right when I'm done. So we created this website on the home page with just some OSPI documents, some general online learning support documents, some remote learning accessibility options right up front here, accessibility tools, translation, all right on the front page. And there's that engagement. And just as a quick visual for the engagement page I mentioned earlier, this is kind of how we have it structured on each of the pages. We have icons that illustrate the choice, and then we have links right underneath them that take you to videos, web pages, whatever you need to learn more about that tool. And a lot of these squares are actually videos as well. So you can kind of look there and see that I have engagement tools and engagement strategies. So first of all, it's not all about the tools, sometimes about, you know, how do we do it? What strategies might we use? Okay, so that's what that looks like. And then I also added this section on engagement tools for early learning, because they almost had kind of their own set of resources that are a little more oriented to the early learning age groups. So that's there for you as well. Okay, and then the other thing you'll notice if I go to the home page is that we have these major sections of, let's see if it'll take me, it's a little delayed. There we go. We have communication. So if you're really wanted to dig into communication, you might want to spend some time here. We have reading supports, writing supports, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm guilty of sometimes leaving that behind or not addressing that, but we've tried to make sure that we want our kids to be accessing all of it, reading, writing, and STEM. And then here's that social emotional learning section I talked to you about. So with that, I'm gonna hop back to the PowerPoint. And I want to give you a little bit of time to do your own little digging into it. So what we're going to do is for 10 minutes, you can either watch the overview video link. It's right here and it's also on that previous slide, or you can go and explore that website on your own. And what I'd like you to take from that is to jot down at least 2 ideas that things that you want to learn more about to add to your buffet. So if you just like to have quiet think time and you want to just jot a note to yourself in a notebook or a paper, great. If you'd like to share those ideas with others, you can go to our Padlet page. And we have a couple questions on this Padlet. And we'd love to share some ideas here, what your ideas are. So you can just click on this plus, and then you're able to add an idea right here. You can add a hyperlink, you can add pictures, whatever you want to do right there. So all you have to do is click, there's a title, and then you click here to write something. And it will post right under each of those sections. It's kind of like a bookshelf. So I'm going to set my timer for, let's see if we can go full 10 minutes. This one is called 8 Tips to Make Curriculum Content Accessible. And I originally created it in this fun graphic, infographic format. And this is a website called Vengage, and our SETC team was going to try it out and see what we thought. So this was my first ever infographic I created for an August class that we did. So I tried to, with all the website resources I was aware of, I tried to just summarize what I thought were the 8 tips and try to write them simply and then give hyperlinks to learn more. So for instance, starting with general accessibility guidelines, there's a whole 1-hour webinar on this. But if you just want to go to a website page that gives you the main highlights, and here's an example of what I mean, you can go there. How do you work with curriculum vendors to purchase accessible formats? This is a big issue right now. Kids are at home, they're trying to access their curriculum remotely, and a lot of it isn't accessible. So how do we address that issue? So this touched more about the PALM initiative there. How do we make sure the content can be read aloud? So this takes you to our SETC website page. So this is cross-reference to the website you were just at. And then, you know, what are some things to keep in mind for PDFs? How do you coach teachers and curriculum developers to make sure they create content if they're doing it in OneNote or in Google Classroom, making sure that's an accessible format there. And there's a link to more tools. Number 4, providing access to digital books. So this is huge. What free resources do you have in your district as far as public libraries or digital libraries? Do you have a system for getting students onto Bookshare if they need that? And then we have, as you noted in SETC's website, lots of free accessible storybooks and chapter books for younger and older kids. And then this is, okay, I've got a packet or a book that was sent home, but the student can't access it. How do you do a quick conversion of printed text to accessible text? So I just gave a quick summary here, and then here's how you learn more right there, back to our SETC website page on how do you make worksheets accessible. And then here, closed captionings, we talked a little bit about that earlier. We're demonstrating it today through a third-party tool called Rev. And oh, a tip I just learned today, this is exciting. For those of you who are using Zoom out there, probably most of you, because Google Classroom people, a lot of you have Zoom. There's going to be live, I think they're just rolling out live transcripts so that if you're on the receiving end, you're in a Zoom meeting, your students can click on a closed caption button and get live closed captioning during a class meeting. So that's super exciting. I just heard that like an hour before this webinar. So keep your eyes out if you're a Zoom user for this new tool that's rolling out. Translation's huge, lots of language barriers. We're having to communicate with families at home, and how can we do that and support them through Microsoft or Google Translator. And then finally, we got all these cool tools, but how do we teach students and their families about these built-in accessibility features? So whether you have a Google Classroom or an iPad or Microsoft, do your students and families know how to access what's already built in and free? And so I just summarized that and gave links to the pages on our website about that. So that's just a quick overview. Another interesting twist, when I created this tip sheet, I had another special ed director that was helping with this say, you know, this is really cool, but it's kind of distracting for me. Can you just do this in a plain text format? And I'm like, I can do that. So I actually, for students or people that might need it in a less distracting format, by the way, this is readable. If you select this text, which you can do, you can use it with any, like a free screen reader or whatever screen reader you are using will read this text, but it's more visually that we're looking at. So if I go back to my PowerPoint here, the next slide has a link to this version. You can see a little bit, it's just plain text, and I'm using, remember number 1 was those built, how to make any document accessible. There's just using the headings, different size text, bullets, how to label your hyperlinks so people know exactly where they're going if they're visually impaired. So, and you have a copy of that in your Google folder. So those two are the same information, just designed differently. And that's another great point when you're designing UDL content. You might need a couple different formats. Teachers might need to keep that in mind, that one format that's really cool in one way might not be very accessible to somebody else. The other thing I'm sharing here by popular demand from a couple prior workshops, I created this accessibility tools to access curriculum sheet. It's a one-pager for my job in Bellevue. And so if you go, and what's exciting about this is I got it posted on the outward-facing website for students and families to access, as well as for educators. So if I go to the link and you have the same link, it will open this page. And right here in this one pager, and this probably will expand to other tools. Sorry, Linda's on here. I don't have math on here yet, but that's coming. Math, and I have done some science stuff too. But need help reading text, need help writing assignments, and then each of these hyperlinks to a tutorial on how to use that tool. So 80% of these tools are available to every student. WordQ, we have, I think, 120 licenses. Everything else is available to everybody. And then Bookshare, as you guys know, is by qualifying disability. But this is meant so that rather than every person calling assistive tech or calling their OT or teacher or SLP and saying, what tool can I use? My student's struggling. They can go to a document and have it look first. Oh, maybe I'll try this. How do I use it? I click on here and there's a tutorial link. The caveat right now is this is on my OneDrive in Bellevue. So from outside the district, when I click on this, it's asking me to sign in. So I can't show you the tutorial from outside the district, but I am going to fix that so that people that are clicking on that outside the district can also open that. But you can just get an idea. This might be something that you want to help support creating in your district. So again, in a one-stop shop, they can say, okay, what accessibility tools do we have in our district? And you would customize this for Google if you're a Google district, or maybe you're using Snap and Read and Co-Writer, you would do that. So here I am. Things are cruising along. So I was going to have you guys have explore time for those, but I want to get to the lesson planning, and then you can choose to explore those as part of doing your lesson planning. So I am going to kind of move on. So the practical idea part there is that I'm giving you all these planning resources that you can go back to. So now you've got the SETC website. You've got the 8 tips to make curriculum content accessible. And then I just threw in that Bellevue accessibility tools sheet to give you an example of how you might have a summary of tools for your district, especially the tools that everyone has, or most everyone has access to. Okay, so let me just cruise down here. And I was going to have you do some sharing on that, but I'm going to combine this with the next sharing. So we're going to go on to the educational experience design, because that's the meat of the matter here. And I want you to have some time to see and think about that. So this is a really cool video. And I just always have so many big ideas that I can't squeeze them in an hour. So I'm not going to actually show this, but it's a really fun I think it's 5-minute video. And this is Chris Bouguet's son. And he's saying, you know what, as a student, and he's probably around 8 or 10, this is what I want to make my educational experience interesting. So he gives you kind of like the top 4 tips on what you can do. So it's a fun watch, and it's something fun to share with teachers so that you can really get a student perspective. It's really well done. But let's go on. I want to show you these, my menu examples. So I took that original blank form that I showed you, and I actually created a full sheet that gives examples. So let me go ahead and open this one. So for early learning, ideally you would offer multiple options, but when I tried to put multiple options in each box, it just got way too crowded. So I was advised to keep it simple and let you fill in the multiple options. Okay, I might go in another way. It's trying to open that Google website. Too many people there. Okay, let's do this. I have it. Oh, guess what? I have it right down here. Early learning. Okay, so you can see here that I filled in some just general goals like improving attention and self-regulation. So for engagement, what might an example activity be? For representation, maybe social storybooks. For expression, maybe sequencing, the daily routine, right? And then what accessibility tools might be needed. And this will be varied compared to the student or students that you have in mind. So you might, you know, for that lesson, like, oh, I got to set this up for Johnny and this up for Susie, for vision support or switch support, or, you know, I need an audiobook for the student, whatever it is. So, and then you can see same thing. So for an early learning student, they might be working on letter and number knowledge, improving their self-expression. And what does that look like for early learner? And then maybe more motor coordination. So I just gave some examples based on that. And ideally you would have, let's say you did representation activity, a lesson, you would have 3 different options under this box, because we always want to give multiple options. And maybe it's even just 2 to start with, but maybe not every student's going to be able to relate to the one option. And I'm going to tie this back to that multicultural comment I made earlier. If you're choosing a book to represent for them to read or listen to, maybe you need to give them a choice of books from a menu that they can choose so that it matches, you know, their cultural background and interests. So I'm just going to give you a quick glimpse of the other ones, and then you guys are going to get a chance to dig in here. So in elementary, I did the same thing. I'm still on early learning, sorry about that. No, oh, there we go. That's the same one, isn't it? There we go. Okay, so this one's slightly different. I did a little higher level goal, maybe looking at reading skills, written expression skills, and math skills. And then under each of those categories, what might that look like? It's easy for me to preach here all day and say, okay, use the UDL principles and create activities that would fit under each one, and make sure you consider accessibility. So I actually painstakingly went through these 3 levels and tried to come up with really concrete examples to kind of help you see what I was trying to share. And hopefully some of these are relatable, or you might come up with totally different ones. But again, so this is elementary level student. And then finally, I have a secondary example. So for this one, maybe they're needing help on attention and organizational skills, or they're in a reading language arts class. And here's that idea of having a choice book, try different formats. So not only a choice of the book, but maybe even different book formats to get their interest. Looking at written expression, maybe throwing in some social studies, because that's pretty tough when you get into high school and they have social studies classes with huge amount of content. How do they navigate that? And then math ideas. So I'm hoping by being able to look at these different examples that you can dig into whatever area of interest where you have students or whatever grade level you're teaching, and get some really concrete ideas on how this might look. And then you can use the blank lesson to do your own planning. So we're doing good on time since I skipped a few things. I'll go back to the PowerPoint, and I think we're just about ready to have you do some exploring. You can either go back and explore these accessibility tools or just start filling in ideas on a plan for your students. So we did this. I showed you these 3 examples. One other area in my original class proposal, I was going to look at UDL, the CAST Lesson Builder. So I am going to show you this website really quick, although I designed my own form because I think it's easier to manage. If you want to go back and look at really detailed lesson plans with all the background knowledge, what's great about this, you do have to create an account to sign in, but then you can go to real teacher lessons. Let's see if I did have my, I had my lesson. Okay, I had my, okay, I'll find that. I had my sign in right there and I had it saved, and now all of a sudden I must be on a different browser. So when you go in there, you can go to shared resources and look at other teachers' plans, or you can go to this build. You can browse others, or you can build your own. again, it's a nice thing to go look at ideas, but I found it a little bit clunky as far as getting way down in the details. So I wanted you to know about this because you might like to set up a account and look at what's already in there. But I think it's easier to just go with a cleaner lesson plan template and just keep those UDL ideas in mind. So I will show you this once I log in, but I don't want to bog you down with that. I want to launch you in your Explore time. So here's my next idea. So you're going to have another 10 minutes now to open up and fill out an educational experience design form that's blank. So it's linked into your PowerPoint. It's also a blank document in that Google folder. If you open your Google folder, you'll see EEU design template, I think. EED, educational experience design, yeah, template. And then I realize you're probably not going to get this done today because we only have 10 minutes, but if you're filling in some ideas there, I think it'd be really cool to share some of these with each other, because you got an idea of some of my ideas and plans, but I'd love to see what you guys come up with. So whether it's today or tomorrow or next week, if you would be willing to share your completed designs in this Google folder, that would be great, right where I have all the other class stuff. You all have access to post there, hopefully. And just for today, whatever you write in your plan, maybe you can just post one idea on the Padlet. So if I just go back here to the Padlet, which I know I had open already, you can tell me right here under your educational experience design, share one idea that you would like to put in a plan based on what you saw in one of my plans, what you saw on a tip sheet here, or what you saw on the SETC website. So with that, I'm going to encourage you to open, hopefully get to this document, the blank one right here. So I want you to go into that and just pick a student or a grade level and just do some brainstorming. This is your brainstorming area. And again, if you choose to share some of your ideas, that would be great. You could even print this, write it, and then just take a picture of it and upload it. Whatever you want to do, type in it, write in it. This is, all these documents are available for you to download and use. Open for everybody. So again, hopefully you, well, actually, let me go back to the, I want to go back to the Padlet for a minute and talk about that. Oh, where's the Padlet? There it is. So you guys came up with some great ideas in the Padlet. I was looking over that. So you're thinking about the accessibility tips. I love this tip: 1 week in a PLC meeting, follow up with how did it work for you. A situational, apply one of the strategies as the need arises, but link to this page so the teacher sees more than one option. A lot of people were excited about the Venn gauge. You want to try making an infographic, or maybe even having a student make an infographic was an idea for your lesson design plan. So that is cool. I think this is really important. I love built-in accessibility features, teaching students the features available to them to access at any time. I think that's always a great starting point, because a lot of districts don't have money to buy a lot of specialized add-ons, but both Google, Microsoft, and iOS all have tons of great built-in features, and a lot of times students just don't know about them or how to use them. So I love that idea. What learning will you take forward? That was going to be my finale, but some of you already are starting there. Creating a choice board with different pre-writing activities. Great idea. So where I said in one of those boxes, if you had three ideas going in that box as like a choice board, and then they could decide which one to do, that would be great. Okay, any other sharing? You guys have been kind of quiet in the chat window today, but hopefully that means you were engaged, surfing around and exploring all these activities. And I see you did a great job trying to put some ideas right here in the Padlet as well. Okay. I'm going to go back to my ending here. So just to kind of summarize what we've done today, it was kind of a little bit of a higher level practical UDL instead of a lot of individual, very specific things. I wanted to kind of give you tools so that you could go back and find the specific things on your own. And you'll have a lot more at your fingertips that way. So how can you create a UDL buffet for your students? Which a lot of variety of choice boards, and making sure you're addressing all those UDL areas, engagement, representation, expression, making sure you're thinking about multicultural aspects in your choices. And then with the Venngage, with the planning templates and with the SETC website, maybe bookmarking those resources I gave you so that you can go back and refer to those when you're planning activities or co-planning with your team. And then please, if you can, I know it's a big ask, but if you want to share your educational experience designs in our Google folder, I meant Google folder there, and then you'll be able to see other people's designs as well. And all of mine are there. I created 3 for you. So if nothing else, those are there for you, but I'd love to see other people's designs or ideas there. And then think about building collaborative relationships to implement UDL. Especially during this time of remote learning, I think we just have to support each other and how to do this, because people are so overwhelmed in general. To think and be creative on your own sometimes is more difficult. But if you can be working with other people, just even bouncing ideas off you guys, even in this little Padlet, is giving me some inspiration. And a lot of you already started thinking, you know, what learning might you take forward to implement tomorrow? Even choosing one thing, whether it was the Venngage or maybe the 8 tips, something in the 8 tips, or maybe, oh, I didn't know you had that page on the SETC website. I'm going to bookmark that and keep that at my fingertips. That was my goal. And also to make sure you had a good planning template. I spent a lot of time creating that and those examples. So I hope that was useful for you guys. So I think that about wraps it up. For follow-up, I just wanted to tell you that next winter or spring, my original plan, I was going to show you, I was going to dig into this book called UDL in Action, 100 Ways to Teach All Learners. For a couple reasons, I didn't dig into this because I think this is a webinar by itself, and I had the other tools I really wanted to show you that I didn't know about when I planned this. So I'm probably going to dig into this book in the spring. And this is a very practical book, like I said, 100 strategies. So that's kind of a fun one. And then if you need help with implementing UDL in your district and you want to either ask SETC for a training or a tech assist, maybe a program, just have a discussion about it, we are here for you. And I have hyperlinks right there on how you would request that. So, and if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me and I'm happy to discuss with you. I'd love to talk about how you're doing in your district, what's happening, what are your challenges, what are your successes. And I wish all of you a wonderful school year, and we'll be in touch. So thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone.